Hello, my loves, and welcome to yet another episode of the Fluffenhammer Adjacent. This time taking a look at a novel from the Black Library that I've actually only this morning finished reading and enjoyed very, very, very much. To no one's surprise whatsoever, it is one of the Black Library novels that deals with one of the Chaos characters from the Warhammer 40,000 universe. This is Huron Blackheart by Mike Brooks. Huron Blackheart, one of the more unusual characters in the Chaos Space Marine faction. He doesn't have like the pedigree of practically all of the other special characters in the Chaos Space Marines, in the Traitor Legions, are veterans of the Long War. They've been around for 10,000 years, since the early days of the Heresy, and indeed before. They were all part of the Great Crusade. You've got, characters like Abaddon, Fabius, Ahriman, Lucius the Eternal, Typhus, etc., etc. All of them are veterans of the Long War. Huron is not, technically. He is old for a Space Marine because he has been around for many centuries at this point, even longer than any Imperial Marine. But he is still one of the more recent renegades. His chapter, the Astral Claws, defected many millennia after the Horus Heresy, and dragged two other chapters into heresy with them, and initiated a fairly significant civil war in the Imperium. And since that time, they have been ensconced in the Maelstrom, which is one of the bigger warp storms in the universe, in the Warhammer 40,000 universe. And Huron has distinguished himself in the eye. He's distinguished himself by becoming one of the preeminent warlords amongst the Traitor Legions, amongst the Chaos Space Marine warbands, even above and beyond most of those that derive from the original Traitor Legions. I mean, the Renegade chapters always have a hard time when they defect, because they've got to deal with the arrogance and assumptions of these ancient warriors who are waging their long war. They've got to find a way of integrating with them, and often with surviving them. I mean, the whole thing with the Chaos Space Marines, the Traitor Space Marines, is that might makes right, effectively, and any hint of weakness, they will just slaughter you. They will just take you out. They have no time for weakness whatsoever. They're almost Darwinian in that regard. And what Huron has managed to do is bizarrely become one of the most powerful warlords amongst them. He controls an empire in the Maelstrom and beyond, in fact, that it's nowhere near as big as, say, Abaddon's Black Legion, and probably nowhere near as big as the, say, legions like the Thousand Sons or the Death Guard or the Word Bearers or the Iron Warriors, but it's still very, very, very big indeed. The Red Corsairs are not like the Black Legion, are not a coherent force. They are many different factions and warbands derived from any number of renegades, traitors, the abandoned, the left behind. Huron is very proud of the fact that he has managed to coerce, corrupt, and otherwise inveigle members of almost every loyalist chapter out there, including the likes of the Ultramarines, the Space Wolves, the Blood Angels. He has followers from them all, basically. And this book's really interesting. It is very much the equivalent of the other established series from the Black Library that deal with one or more of the established Chaos characters. So it's Huron's equivalent of John French's Ahriman series, or of Aaron Dembski-Bowden's Abaddon Black Legion books, or Josh Reynolds' Fabius Bile books. And like those books, it is designed to be from his perspective. It is not interested in painting Huron as a total monster, or as a lunatic, or as just a purveyor of atrocity. He is a psychologically complex being, and what really the focus of the book, it's very, very much small scale, the story itself. Not much of incredible note happens within it. It's more about the internal politics of the Red Corsairs and how Huron deals with that. You have to bear in mind, being the leader of a Chaos Space Marine warband, especially one as vast and as fractious as the Red Corsairs, where there's not even like a cohering ideology binding them together, really, like there is in the Black Legion, for example. In the Black Legion, loyalty to Abaddon and his agenda to set the Imperium ablaze is everything, yeah? There are very few direct challenges to Abaddon's loyalty, because he's just so powerful, so influential. Any even hint of that will be crushed immediately, and those responsible will be staked out to die in obscene and horrible ways. Huron has to deal with that to the nth degree, because the Red Corsairs are largely amassed from pirates, lunatics, renegades, sadists, tyrants, despots, people like space marines and traitors who really want to eke out their own little empires. And so challenges to Huron's authority are much more common. They are subversive. They don't occur directly, because again, Huron, if they occur directly, Huron will just obliterate them. He has such incredible influence within the Red Corsairs and such authority that no one can really stand against him. But it does happen. He's constantly monitoring the Red Corsairs for any hint of over-ambitious underlings, generals and lieutenants who are maybe getting a little bit too independent, a little bit too big for their britches, or who are perhaps trying to amass power in other ways, like in occult ways, by gathering artifacts and weaponry and amassing followers from outside the Red Corsairs. And that's exactly what this book is about. It's about Huron dealing with the internal politics of his warband. And it's really interesting. Huron himself is a really fascinating character. What this book paints him as is always the smartest guy in the room. He is one of these chaos characters, a bit like Ahriman and Fabius, who they have a perspective on the 40k universe that's unblinkered, basically. Unlike, say, the Space Marines who are loyal to the Imperium, who are psycho-indoctrinated and who cannot really look past their own oaths of loyalty and their own ideologies. Huron can. He sees the absurdities, he sees the hypocrisies of both the Imperium and his fellow followers of the Chaos Powers, and the internal politics that dictates them all. And his entire modus operandi is using that perspective to subtly manipulate everyone around him, to keep them on their toes, basically, so that any attempt on his throne will always be undermined by some grander scheme or by some other underling that he's been manipulated into subverting the plot somehow. That's the way he has to operate, and that's the way he does. He is always the smartest guy in the room. He's always 2 or 3 or 4 steps ahead of his most ambitious and smartest and most capable underling, and that's the way he has to play it. It's doubly fascinating when you consider that Huron himself is always in pain. At the end of the Badab War, he was almost killed. His entire half of his body was basically melted away by a melter blast, and it's only through somewhat sketchy arcane sciences and occult influence that he was saved. And the bionics that replace most of his body are imperfect. They're incredibly advanced. They're from the dark age of technology, but they're also blended with warp power and occult energy, so that they're not quite properly grafted to his body, and they are sources of perpetual pain, even though they're keeping him alive. He is in pain all the time, and that is a really interesting undercurrent through this book. What he's all about, Huron, is his own power of will, effectively. He is constantly fighting against the agony of his own body, which is the pain of it would be enough to drive a mortal man mad. It would just cripple them. But not only the ambitions of his underlings, who are always trying to undermine him and sort of claw their ways to his throne, but also the whispered temptations of the Chaos Powers. Like a lot of Renegade chapters and Renegade warbands, he has thrown his lot in with the Chaos Powers, but he doesn't venerate them himself. He doesn't worship them. He regards them as a means to an end. They are useful allies and tools given certain circumstances. But he is very aware of the threat they pose. Part of this book, part of the structure of this book, is that Huron is thrown into situations where he will find himself being very, very subtly tempted by one or more of the Chaos powers to submit to their will. So, for example, the agony that's constantly afflicting him and is undermining his attention and his focus and his judgment. There's a point in the book where he finds himself thinking, if I could only just... If I could only just throw in my lot with, say, Nurgle, and have this pain be eliminated, or rather even be something that I welcome, that strengthens me, that would be wonderful. But he draws himself up short. He always draws himself up short and finds himself saying, no, this pain is mine. It's a human being's pain, and it's my pain, and I am not the slave of any demon or god. He is constantly engaging in these mental battles with whispered and unspoken temptations that derive from demons, from the warp, from the gods themselves, which sort of infiltrate into his mind as his own thoughts, as his own emotions. It's very well structured and quite well written. It's, as I say, the scale of the book is nowhere near as grand as the Ahriman books or Fabius Bile's books or the books about Abaddon the Despoiler, but it is very interesting. It provides this very close focus on who Huron is and how he operates. One of the first things that happens in the book is a raid from the Red Corsairs on an Imperial space station, and there's a particular part of the space station is being defended by a tech priest and her Castellan robots, basically. She is directing them to just launch fire, plasma fire, at the door that the Red Corsairs are trying to come through. And Huron basically stands at the door and says to her, look, this is a no-win situation for you. Either you're going to die to my Red Corsairs, who will get through eventually, or I'm just going to go away and we're going to bomb this station out of existence with our fleet. So either way, you and your robots are done. However, if you want, logically speaking, your best course of action is to lay down your arms, walk out here, and come with us. We have a place for you amongst our ranks. We have a place for everyone. Think about it logically. Isn't that what you of the Omnicia are all about? It's demonstrating that Huron's greatest strength, his greatest power, is his politics, his manipulations. He's a psychological manipulator par excellence, is Huron. And one of the lords of the traitor war bands, the Chaos Space Marines, who utilizes subtlety and politics as much as he does brute force. He is very, very aware of it's almost preternatural, his ability to assess what buttons to push, exactly what to say and do to provoke a reaction from everyone around him. It's really interesting, it's really fascinating, and it demonstrates just how smart Huron actually is. And of course, that's exactly what happens. This Magos does join him, and although she never quite becomes his loyal follower, she does start to respect him by the end. And he starts to respect her as well. That's another thing. He is not just mindlessly violent. You know, he doesn't just see weakness in those who are not like him, which a lot of the lords of the Chaos Space Marines do. He sees use and worth everywhere. And he knows he's like a very good employer, bizarrely. He knows how to bring it out of people. He knows how to wring the very best out of his underlings, even like the worst of them. One of the key tensions in this book is there's a very ambitious underling and one who is quickly amassing influence and power amongst the Red Corsairs called Verngar. Verngar the Anointed, is it also? The Apostate. Verngar the Apostate. And he's not making an open play for Huron's throne, he's not that stupid, but it is clear that he is flexing his muscles. He is seeing how far he can go, and how long it will take before he can actually make an open play for Huron's throne. And Huron sees this immediately. I mean, like, from the very beginning, he sees this, but he also recognizes that that ambition is a strength to a certain degree until it becomes genuinely threatening. It's something he can use, and it's something he does. It's something he actively fosters in his underlings. And that tension is very interesting. I mean, he walks the line a couple of times in this book. With Verngar, he really does. There are several points where he gambles and Verngar could potentially win. It's just that Huron is not only very, very apt when it comes to manipulating his underlings and directing them into situations where they think that they've won. They think that they're in a position to reveal themselves, to take power, and they really aren't. But he's also very lucky. There's almost like a supernatural luck that surrounds him, which may in fact be supernatural. It may be the influence of the chaos powers or demons or powers within the warp that like him, that find him amusing or interesting, or that feel that he might be useful to them somewhere down the line. There are several points where luck plays a big part, and he just gambles on it. I mean, another thing, there's a weird kind of fatalism to him in this book. Huron fully acknowledges at several points that, well, this is the knife edge. This could be the end of me, but what of it? Who cares? I've already survived the worst, and if I do fail here, if I do die, well, that's it, isn't it? I deserve it. I've played this game, I've gambled, and I lost for the first time. It's fine, There is this strange fatalism to him that is also a strength. He is a very, very interesting character. His regard for the older traitor legions, like Abaddon, like the Black Legion, he has a fair degree of scorn for them. He does have a fair degree of scorn for them, because his attitude is they are still as blinded by their ideologies as they always were. They're still slaves, and they still continue to make slaves of themselves in one way or another, whether it's to the gods, whether it's to these iconoclasts like Abaddon or whatever. And he's not interested in any of that. All he's really interested in is seeing a new empire carved out. That is his principal concern. Something that is not prey to the hypocrisies of either the old Legion structures and loyalties or the Imperium. He wants something new. There's this strange, like a lot of the chaos characters, like Fabius, like Araman, there is this weird dark utopianism to him. And that, again, is absolutely fascinating. It feels like, this book feels like it's a sort of testing of the waters. It's a first chapter to see how things go. But I think it's very successful, and I really look forward to anything that comes after that broadens the scope of what Huron is doing, and maybe brings him into contact with some of the other forces within the Chaos Space Marines.